Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Why, hello there. Welcome back to Inside the GM Studio side question episode where we field questions from the internet. I am your host, David.
I'm Matt.
And we're just going to get right into it here for the first side question episode of the year to see if the stupidity has been tamped down at all. Actually, I should say that last probably few months we haven't had a question, even come across a question that was like annoying or stupid or whatever.
Very true.
Pretty good.
Haven't had to re-roll yet?
Haven't had to re-roll. I get a 12 this week.
Okay, 12. Boom, 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 and boom. All right. This one comes from these glyphs on our Ask Game Masters with the title, How to Help My Players Retrain Themselves Out of the Hack and Slash Mindset. Hi, all.
Hi.
Apologies in advance if this question has been asked many times before. Please point me in the right direction to find previous answers. If so, this is like the beginning of every single post on our Ask Game Masters. Usually I just go beyond that, but I know people love it when David says hello. Basic question is this. I'm looking for advice on helping my players break out of their railroady D&D mindset and embrace a much more self-directed, open-ended style of play. We're a group of good friends, played a fair bit of 5e back in our 20s, and now we're doing a mothership campaign, 4 sessions in, and it's going great, and everyone's enjoying it, which is the most important thing. But every session has had some pain points where the table just seems to be groping desperately in the dark for the next story beat, and I think it's because we've been subconsciously trained by only ever having played through D&D campaign books before, where there is a pre-written plot to unlock, and you have to play in the right way to pick up the telegraphed clues and progress to the next linear plot point. In our campaign, which is much more open-ended, there have been some moments with a real sense of uncertainty, confusion, some frustration at the table, a real sense of what should we be doing, and answering whatever you want to that question isn't really helping. They feel like they must have missed something because they're used to always having their next move being so obvious and telegraphed by the pre-written plot. I guess I'm asking, how can I help to break those linear plot unlock shackles and help my players embrace their inner creativity? As an example, I found that using Jason Cordova's paint the scene idea has been really helpful getting their ideas flowing a bit. I guess I'm looking for more things like that. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't either, but
It looks like it was a blog post. Okay.
firstly, the title of this question doesn't seem to really address the substance of the question.
I was expecting something completely different.
So was I.
I was expecting another, my party or my players are a bunch of murder hobos and it's getting boring.
Yep. This is something that I suspect every GM who has broken a little bit from the mold of a more linear story has struggled with. Players that have come up on linear stories with obvious plot beats and have never really done anything character-driven or self-actualizing, autonomous adventuring, probably don't really know how to do. And so that can be tricky, and the questioner is right to get out. Down. Sorry, cat.
Cats.
Well, she's like sniffing around my like mic plugins. Like, yeah, go away. The questioner is right to assume that it isn't. They don't seem to be coming up at it from a place of frustration from their players, and is acknowledging that if the players aren't latching on to certain elements of the plot, that's likely a failing in the way the plot is crafted. So that would be the first step, and he's already got that down. So that's pretty good. Just the fact that he's asking this question and not coming at it with my fucking players, like they don't get it, like blah. It's like, okay, well, but why would they get it? You can't just throw somebody in the deep end of the pool and expect them to know how to swim if they've never been shown how to swim.
Yup.
So there's a few things, a few tactics, I guess, that are more successful, at least in my experience. So if the plot is open-ended, then, or let's just say that it's not particularly prescriptive, right? That it's not like the plot goes in one direction and the players are hopping on the train car of the story and following along with a few options here and there. So what that means is that it should and could be driven by what the players' values and goals are for the adventure, and that there should be a multitude of options available. So the chore now becomes, how do I get the players to recognize that by engaging with what it is that they would like, or the plot beats that they would like to pursue. And what you need to do with that is try to, in some ways, either in a metagame sense, like outside the game, ahead of the game, post-mortem after the game, whatever, or in-game world, figure out what it is that's motivating the characters. And this would typically start with a good session 0 and some thoughtful character crafting ahead of the campaign. So given that he didn't give any allusions to the fact that he had done that, it might be a little difficult to kind of get it in there now, but not impossible. So try to encourage the players to think on the ways in which the plot is interesting to them or interesting to their characters. What is it that motivates their characters? What elements of it are intriguing, are maybe mysterious, or play into the character's arc individually and maybe as the party's arc or the party's interests entirely. So once you've done that, you will have planted the seed for the players to kind of be pursuing things that hopefully are in the plot already. We've gone on this jag before about like, if it's just too sandboxy, just do whatever you want and go wherever you want, then they have nothing to grab onto. And so the way to handle it on the other end, so like once you've done that, you've kind of planted the seed for the players to kind of, for lack of a better word, you've empowered them to be more autonomous. Because whether they realize it or not, getting used to prescriptive plots is not, they're just used to being constrained, and that's not necessarily bad when you constrain them, but they just don't know any other world outside of that kind of confines. Existed your whole place in one town, it's going to be overwhelming, or one building, one room. It's going to be overwhelming when you go to a new city, to a new place, or whatever. You're just going to not have any idea what it is that you should be doing because you just haven't been empowered to think in those terms. So while it might seem like a chore to the players initially, really all you're doing is you're removing a constraint. And I firmly believe that if you frame it and think about it in that way, I'm removing a constraint from the players instead of giving them a task burden of like having to do X. The appeal of an open-ended campaign is precisely the amount of autonomy and the amount of pursuit. So that shouldn't feel like a chore. You should have engaged with this sort of campaign because it was interesting, hopefully to everybody. And so if the players have signed up on the dotted line for that style of campaign, and I pray that they have, like I'm hoping that you didn't just throw them into a game where they didn't know what they were getting, didn't discuss it with them, didn't like, you know, get some consent from them that this is a thing that they want,
Mm-hmm.
that would not be good. But I'm hoping it's more like old habits die hard, and they were interested, but now they're just kind of floundering as to how to engage. So once you empower them, then there are things that you can do within the context of the adventure itself. Once you're armed with the things that you know players want to pursue because they have certain values, they have certain motives, they have certain backgrounds, then you get some color as to like what types of characters these are, and can put things in the plot that are things for them to latch onto, and it won't seem so occult, arcane, hidden from view, that they're that these things are for them, and that they lead down a certain path. The problem with too much autonomy is players get analysis paralysis because they don't know where each plot thread or what would happen if they pursued a particular line of a story. And they're also, whether they're acutely aware of it or just subconsciously aware of it, they also realize that there's no way you could have fleshed out the entirety of the world and every case that they could potentially pursue. So whether they're like consciously aware of that, they have these guardrails that like I can't do anything. I know that. Like if I just randomly walk off in a direction, go to some random town that like maybe is plotted out, but then decide that I want to like just get on a boat and sail halfway across the like you don't have all that mapped out, and the restraint in that is actually a courtesy to the GM, but also to protect their own fun, because anybody who's ever played in a campaign where the DM is just totally flying off the cuff, kind of crafting everything as it happens, you know that that's not usually very interesting. It's pretty boring because you want to feel like you're uncovering elements of the plot, not that the GM is just kind of firing from the hip and
Mm-hmm.
creating them on the fly, because then there's no mystery. It's not like anything has already been set and you're unraveling it and you're discovering it. It's just being created for you as you go, and that is like, okay, like I don't feel like there's anything to pursue because I'm making things happen. I'm making the story happen. So what you need to remember is that the story needs to exist independent of the players, but it needs to be crafted for the players and their sensibilities. So once you have some ideas, try putting things in your campaign that are in that vein, and they won't seem so subtle, or they won't be so confused, because they'll just be like, oh, that's a thing for me. I'm this type of character. I like this or whatever, and you can stuff the adventure full of possible threads, and it will still seem very open ended. You have four characters, and maybe you have three or four potential main plots and five or six potential subplots that are based on the character's background, profession, class, history, motivations, personal ties, whatever it is. And it will feel very layered, even though it won't entirely be, because, and I've said this before, I don't think there's no such thing as a complete sandbox adventure
Mm-hmm.
unless you just throw out the idea that there is going to be a story already laid out for the players. I'll let Matt jump in here now.
So I'm there with you right at the beginning that if you don't give your players, or no, 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 not give your players, if your players don't give you some sort of form of what they want to do, their goals to achieve, David did a really good job coming up with this. And we don't do it right now, kind of, I think it's because we're doing a pre made module right now. But when David came up with his fate point system, little homebrew that we have, in order to earn those fate points, you had to achieve something. It wasn't like I find a brand new weapon or something like that. It had to be something that could just kind of come out of the blue, that was not really materially rewarded, but it was a goal that you had to come up with. You had to have three of them. And I think that really helped him out. figuring out how to make it feel a little bit more sandboxy, but leave it to a point where he could get to quite easily. And that is what really helps out, especially with Mothership, which is a spacefaring horror RPG. That is like the worst game to have as a sandbox. Just thinking, if you want to go to Alfei, what is it, Alfei Persei 8 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
if you want to go all the way out there, I hope you know what it is, because these characters have faster than light travel and they can go wherever they want in the universe.
Yeah, it's the bigger the sandbox, the more overwhelming it is. So if you have intergalactic, like if you give players a pretty sandbox option in a fairly small village or something like that, probably not as much of an issue because the village has borders. You just told them there's 100 cottages and 200 there's 400 buildings total, and like here's a little shopping district or a little guild district or whatever, and you break it down like that. And then the city has borders, and they know that like they can explore, but within the confines of those borders, because anything outside the borders is likely outside the scope of anything particular, unless a plot thread or something takes them outside the city. But like the bigger it gets, you just explore a whole region, explore a whole province, explore a whole continent, explore a whole world, explore a whole like galaxy. It's like now they're just like, holy fuck, like this is overwhelming. I don't know where are the breadcrumbs, and you don't need to railroad the players or tell them this is your next plot beat, but you do need to give them breadcrumbs that indicate where where uh where there's some there, right? Like it's just like this is a thing. Like you're not going to wander out into the wilderness without good reason. This is why you need to understand the character's motives and history. It might not even be a personal motive, but like if you know something about this character is some sort of space corsair and has certain sensibilities about stuff, then although it might not be something the character would necessarily has a goal or a pursuit, but it's just something they can latch onto, right? And the most distilled version of this down is usually you just boil it down to the most basic um, player things, where players typically want, or characters typically want some semblance of excitement and the promise of glory, wealth, some sort of reward. So the easiest plot threads are just they're not tailored to any character and specifically, but you just go like, oh, there's some gold in this old lost mine. That's usually enough of a motivation. But the more sandboxy your adventure gets, the more they need to be tailored to the player's specific things. But you can give them stuff that they're not necessarily keen to pursue, but you just know that they would probably latch onto. If you do that for all of your characters and then for the party as a whole, uh, ideally the party as a whole, because you want to have some singular plot thread, right? And maybe there's several singular plot threads that the party can pursue, but they need to be mutually exclusive. If we go to Omicron Persei 8, we can't go to Omicron Persei 7 because they're just different planets. And so try to distill it down. Think of things that think of an identity that your party shares. What's their common goal? Why are they a party? What are their basic motivations? Um, and then give them a few things that they can kind of get on, and then maybe a few secondary things that they can pursue, ideally along with the main plot. You're going to investigate this ruined. I don't know. I'll just use medieval fantasy because that's still a thing. But let's just say it's like an old abandoned space base, right? That's fantasy or sci-fi
Fantasy.
sci fantasy. You're going to explore this old abandoned space station because someone lost contact with it, right? And you need to kind of figure out what's going on. So this is an investigation, right? It should pique their curiosity and should get them intrigued, provided they give a shit about the person that lost contact and the reasons they lost contact. So you need to start there with why do they care about a particular quest? And if the answer is, well, they really don't, it's just a quest. So, okay, we'll figure out a way to make them give a shit about it as it ties to their personal motivations or their goal as a party. Then they get sent off there And there's no reason why you couldn't embed some smaller things like, oh, okay, like Matt's character in particular, uh, the whole party wants to go investigate the abandoned space station, but Matt's character also heard some rumors that there's some some guy in his faction had disappeared there, and he had some key information about the faction's goals. And so while you're there, you can also look for that guy, and he has a super cool ray blaster or whatever. And so now like you have like an independent goal, and it's like can go concurrent. Side quests are things that take each party member in a different direction. They just get confusing. This is the biggest downfall of sandbox campaigns, which is they can just get everybody going in different directions, and then the party suddenly like disagrees, and there's no cohesion. They don't know where to go because they don't know which things are most important. There needs to be a few things that are fairly simple that are party goals and that motivate them to do something. And then if you give them a slew of options, probably no more than 5 to 7, you start getting up over that. That's too much for players to really get a handle on. Give them 5 to 7 options, or even 3 to 5 is probably better to pursue. But it's really easy to make it appear as though maybe all 5 of them are really, they distill down after a couple of acts into another central plot point. But they don't need to know that, because they're just going, maybe all 5 of these rooms eventually terminate in this like one chamber hall or whatever. But which path you take can change up the adventure. So like a choose your own adventure, right? Like the book goes in one direction, but you can navigate in a variety of different ways. So I'm trying to think of any other tactics that it would
I got
beat
one
that.
for you.
All right, lay it on me.
So, one thing that I found recently that I thought would be really good for those folks that say that they want a more sandboxy feel, and this works in both like fantasy, sci-fi. I think it'll work pretty much anywhere, because anywhere you go, you're going to find bounty boards. When it comes to stories like this, you go to cities, or you just see up on a post or somewhere of a bounty board, all these wanted criminals, or even it could be like if you don't have adventure guilds in your setting, bounty boards can also be from just farmers that are asking you to come fight off some monsters that are ruining their crops. And it's not like you were, telling your players this is the quest, but as they're moseying around, you could just be like, oh, and you look over there, you see that they got a bounty board over here right next to a well. But they'll say, ooh, bounty board, that should be something that we should check out, because that sounds interesting. So I think that's an easy way, a good plant to have, at least to get some things going.
Yeah, but if you're at the early stage where the party is he didn't really detail like kind of like what the party has done yet. Like it's like first 4 sessions or whatever. So maybe he had a more prescriptive plot initially, and now it's just kind of opened up. But typically the key, if you're not going to delve into the characters' backstories and motivations, because they really haven't done the work of that and they don't want homework or whatever, the best solution is to craft lively NPCs that resonate with your characters, that give them a reason to make a connection with a certain NPC, and then that certain NPC has things that they need done but are incapable of doing. And if you do a little bit of just role playing and legwork to establish them as someone that the party trusts and likes and has affection for, perhaps they represent a larger value that the PCs have. Maybe they're a guild leader, or maybe they're a politician, or maybe they're a community organizer. And so it could be what this one person wants, but they want it because they reflect the needs of like a larger community that they represent. And so then they're doing the work that like benefits a whole village or a whole planet even. And presumably if you're having some sort of adventure base, then the characters have heroic aspirations and should want to help. But who knows? And maybe they're like self-serving space pirates, and in which case, that doesn't really seem like it would be all that difficult to get them invested. You just kind of dangle some carrot in front of them, and they'll go chase after it. So,
I was looking through the comments, and they all seem to kind of point towards the same area, except I swear to God, this comment section has the longest fucking comments I've ever seen.
Really?
As long as we've been doing this part of the show, I've never seen them this long. But this one kind of brings it all up into a nice little box here. Even though the poster, the commenter, I guess I should say, I have a bit of umbrage with them as their screen name is Duergar, and their picture is the Demigorgon from Stranger Things. And I'm just, ooh, you have a D&D name, but you're going to have something called a Demigorgon that is not a Demigorgon, and I don't know if I like that.
It's not.
But their comment is actually pretty good. Where Duergar says, there is, of course, the whole, quote, do they actually want that, unquote, part of it you need to sit down and talk about. But besides that, the thing I found was putting the weight on the characters instead of the players, asking them, how does Grok react / feel / thing / do about that? PC goals is also very useful. I use it a lot in my sci-fi games where the players set goals for their PCs. So if they don't know what to do next, they got something to work towards. There is also the PBTA approach with triggers for XP. Giving them specific behaviors to aim for to get XP has been very useful for some people in our group. Not all, but some. So yeah, there seemed like a lot of people, when I was looking at a lot of the comments earlier, they really tried to push for that. Is this really what they want? Did you find out if this is the kind of campaign that they wanted before you started? And that's a good question. That's a damn good question. As David said before, this should have been something that you asked, before you actually brought it out. For a guy like me, that I flip-flop game systems so much, I make sure to always tell my players, as soon as one campaign ends, hey, do you guys mind? Hell, sometimes I'll ask, what do you guys want to do? If you want to do different, what would you like to try? And then I will kind of throw some stuff out there. I've been reading this and this. You want to try any of these? But I want to make sure that they're all on board to actually do that, because if I have been working on, if I did pick up Mothership, which is, like I said, spacefaring horror, I want to keep it in that horror genre. Are these guys really up for like sticking to it the way that I would like this, to make sure to keep it at least somewhat in the right feel? And some people, they just don't want to, and that's fine. Just make sure that they get to put in their 2 cents.
It probably just goes back to an adage that I don't see too many, or I should say I see GMs falling into a lot, which is you have to play with the players you have, not the players you wish you had.
Yup.
Right? So it's like, if you want to run a certain style of game, like the players are not like there to serve your fun, right? You're supposed to have like a mutual thing that you both enjoy. And so this, like, if you just kind of put them into a game, like, this is the sort of game I want to run, and here's the spirit of it, it's like a lot of players aren't up for that. There's a reason that some games are more prescriptive and linear, and some are more open-ended, and some are kind of a bridge between the two. Some players don't want to come up with what happens in the story, where we're going, what my motivations are. Like, they don't want that. It feels like homework, and they're just like, I'm not up for that. I just want to come to a game and kind of, the story's already set, and I want to navigate through that story with a little bit of variance. But I don't want to have to do the work that the GM is, like, in my estimation, supposed to be doing. And so you have to make sure, and like I said, I was kind of coming at it from the assumption that he asked about this, because that's typically what you would do first. But it's very possible that it's like they kind of were intrigued by the game, and then they started playing it, and then maybe, he didn't say, I assume he was homebrewing. Did he say he was homebrewing?
No.
So I assume this is something that he's come up with. But maybe if it's the spirit of the game is more open-ended, and he just kind of doesn't know, like, okay, like, now what do I, the players are supposed to kind of craft the plot, and it's like, yeah, but you got to give them something to latch onto. It doesn't need to be, here is your next plot beat, go do next plot beat, but it does need to have some hints or clues, or what I was calling breadcrumbs earlier, that give them some instincts as to which threads lead to other uh, other intrigue and other like things going on, especially like you said in an intergalactic kind of thing. You like, it's just so open that they're likely to be just kind of floundering, figuring out what they have to do.
Mm,
Perhaps if it's like a horror, space horror. So we're talking like Alien,
yeah.
Screamers kind of
Hmm.
worlds where it's
Yep.
like,
The Thing.
yeah, the thing. So, well, that's cosmic horror, but sure, something like that where it's like a
Hmm.
blend of it might be, it might be useful to try to tease down, like drill down into the things that terrify the characters, right? Like, what are their fears, and then give them motivation to pursue things that are going to set the stage for some shit being scary to them. Uh, that's going to be thematically on point, and it's also going to ensure that the tension and the drama stay amped up. It doesn't need to be perfect, but you just go like, okay, what are your characters afraid of, and what sort of themes and uh, exploits are would confront your character's fears, and then give them some like reason, like, you have to do this because, but there's going to be this thing there that, or a hint at thing that might be scary to them, and then give them tension between a goal or a motivation and a fear, and then that will spur them in that direction, hopefully, because if it's a horror themed game and the characters are just avoiding all of the shit that scares them, then that doesn't really seem particularly heroic to me. But that's the tension between competing goods can often be a very good motivator to get players to do a particular action. So embed those in the script, or the even just the NPCs where they have, competing goods and they're roping the players in. It could be an easy uh, someone asking for help kind of thing. But if they get embroiled with, in a more free form kind of sandbox way, they get embroiled with certain characters, then now their goals, or the stakes are
Mm.
intertwined with those, and then once you raise the stakes, then the player should gravitate toward things that have high stakes, because typically those things have high payoffs, because that's what the stakes are. It's like you stand to lose a lot, but you also stand to gain a lot. Lots of glory, a new starship, whatever, renown and wealth and all this stuff. So, and then if they're not gravitating toward the things that have high stakes with dramatic tension, then yeah, I'm out of ideas.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do after that. So,
You know what I just realized?
what's that?
The ancient uh distress beacon while going through space is the spacefaring horror version of I Heard a Rumor in the Tavern for medieval fantasy.
Kind of, yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like the
it's like,
go-to
yeah,
to kind of
distress
kick
beacon.
off your first campaign.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that certain things that are tropes are well worn, because they're good. They're tried and true, and although they might be slightly cliched or obvious, they're plausible within most worlds. Like the unexpected visitor, I'm a big fan of. Unexpected visitor shows up in any given plot. It doesn't matter if it's like a family drama or a sci-fi, something that isn't like, some that has some momentum collides with the player's otherwise uh, calm world, and shakes up their routine, and it's usually a call to action in some way. Like if something unexpected, especially if it's violent or horrific, happens and it doesn't spur them to some sort of action, then yeah, but typically players are pretty good about latching on to things that they don't need to be told what to do. This is a very common like misconception that some players need to be told what to do. And at a high level, I suspect that's true. Like it's true that they need to be told what to do,
If you
but
want
that's
to get
because
nitpicky.
but the only reason they need to be told what to do is because you've only ever presented anything interesting in the plot that tells them what to do. What players want is something interesting in the game to pursue. And there
Yes.
and that doesn't need to be something you tell them to do. It happens all the time with players that are engaged with the world, where it's like sometimes you'll craft an NPC and you won't realize that the NPC is like more interesting than you realize, and the players will be like, What's up with this guy? He seems kind of cool. I'm gonna like talk to him a little more." And you're like, "Oh, okay. Maybe there's some there now, but this happens inadvertently sometimes. Like when I write, sometimes you'll write like a short story, or like I write screenplays and stuff like that. And sometimes someone will read something and they'll be like, that character, the one that like the guy met in the bar or whatever, like I wanted more of her or whatever. And you're like, huh, like how did I inadvertently craft an interesting character that was just meant to be a throwaway character? This you need to be careful with this sometimes, because if you're not thoughtful about the NPCs you craft and the plot threads that you craft, they can become red herrings, or they can communicate to the players that they're more important than they are. And like I think I used the example of the bartender in the first John Wick movie because I love that example. It's like the character is way more interesting, has all this intrigue, and like seems like they're going to be important later, but they're not. Like they're just kind of someone to give John Wick this MacGuffin or whatever. And so you got to be careful with that. But if you're thoughtful about, like, it would be pretty rare that a plot thread or a character that you gave little thought to would come off very interesting. But if you put some thought into things and you go like, okay, what is this plot thread, this hook, this character, this whatever, and you just make it interesting, I don't know that I've ever met a player that wouldn't gravitate towards something that seems interesting, even if they don't think it's what they're, quote, supposed to be
Yeah.
doing.
And I know I've talked about this before, way back. For those that have just recently started listening, don't go back. I'll tell you right now that I've done it many a times where I'm sitting there and I'm GMing a game, and I love using this reference because I used it, and of course it went swimmingly because one of my players kind of brought it up and it made them feel clever. We were playing Shadowrun 5th edition, and it's me, my buddy Adam, Rob, Nick, and Jason. Other than Adam, David has played with all of them. He knows them. Jason is the only other person there that has played Shadowrun before, and he knows the system and the lore of it very well. And as we're playing, I am just throwing spirits at him because it's just what I was going for in my story at the time. But the way that I was describing it, I might have been unconsciously doing this, but Jason was like, "This sounds like a Shadim." And I was just like, "Oh, it does sound like a Shadim. Maybe, yes." And I wrote it down real quick. I was like, "This is a Shadim," because that was a lot more interesting to me. And one of the players brought it up. And of course, as soon as he said that, all the other players there were just like, "Ooh, what's a Shadim?" And he kind of just broke it down for him right there. And he was playing the mage. So I was like, yeah, he'll give it to him. He knows all about spirits. So he tells him about it. And it was fun because after a while, I was like, I'm going to start putting this in here. And a few weeks later, they find out it was a Shadim, and Jason felt very good about it. And it was nice. It was something that he just kind of pulled at, and I was able to fulfill later because he came up with a much better idea than I had.
Yeah, it's when you trace most things back to what constitutes an interesting element to an RPG, usually you can trace it back somewhere to some sort of danger. And so like how quickly you get from thread to danger is going to be governed by the genre. So like in a horror or a mystery genre, typically the burn is much slower because you're building dread and you're building anticipation. And something like fantasy or cyberpunk, it's going to be shorter, right? Like it's
Mhm.
like it's an immediate danger. It's immediately clear what the danger is and what it's doing. So how action oriented it is. I don't know what this game necessarily entails, but if it's a horror thing, then try to wrap up the danger in a few layers of intrigue, dread, suspense. But make no bones about it, the players will usually, whether they realize it's tracing to danger at some point or another, they'll latch onto it because there's again just basically danger raises the stakes, and so
Mhm.
you need to be doing that with each thread, or the players will just feel like it's kind of banal and routine, and it doesn't have any. It's like you need to establish the why, right? Like, and that's why I was kind of going on about player motivation and things that they care
Mhm.
about, because the why is what motivates them to do the
Yeah.
and or the that or whatever. And um so that's typically a pretty good formula, and hopefully that I think that's about all I got to say, really.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's all she wrote for me. So if you got anything to close on there, David, I think we might just keep this at a good night.
And good luck.